They are often labeled as the canaries in the coal mine, the pebbles that are blasted by increased wave action due to storm surge, those who sit helplessly at the mercy of sea level rise, the small islands where farming cycles have been impacted by sporadic climate events. Small islands whose freshwater and seasonal fishing patterns have been disrupted by our planet's revolts due to decades of uncontrolled greenhouse gas emissions. With the effect of climate change being a clear and immediate danger, the Alliance of Small Island States was established in 1990 to represent the interests of small islands and low-lying coastal developing states. The association's members, which include much of the Caribbean, Fiji, the Maldives, Mauritius, the Seychelles, and Singapore, amongst others, are responsible for less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, for far too long, they have been left largely on their own to cope with the already catastrophic impact of those emissions. Their voice was categoric, forceful, and pregnant with demands for change by the industrialized world and the decision makers at the Conference of the Parties number 27, currently underway in Egypt.
This is what I want you to deliver on. First, we must demonstrate this transformational shift to implementation, putting negotiations into concrete actions. Every corner of human activity must align with our Paris commitment of pursuing efforts to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees.
The Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted by 196 parties at COP21 on the 12th of December 2015. Its goal is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to pre-industrial levels. To achieve this long-term temperature goal, countries aim to reach global peaking of greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible to achieve a climate-neutral world by mid-century. Despite the adoption of the Paris Agreement, the apocalyptic impact of climate-related disasters and the lack of finance to adapt and mitigate affects the lives and livelihoods of all member states of the Alliance of Small Island States.
The horror and the devastation wreaked upon this earth over the course of the last 12 months since we met in Glasgow, whether the apocalyptic floods in Pakistan, or the heat waves from Europe to China, or indeed, in the last few days in my own region, the devastation caused in Belize by Tropical Storm Lisa, or the torrential floods a few days ago in St. Lucia. We don't need to repeat it because a picture spoke 1,000 words earlier. But what we do need to do is to understand why we are not moving any further. 1.5 to stay alive cannot be that mantra. And I take no pride in being associated with having to repeat it over and over and over. We have the collective capacity to transform.
In UN climate talks, the phrase loss and damage refers to cost already being incurred from climate-fueled weather extremes like rising sea levels or freak weather occurrences. Climate funding so far has focused on cutting carbon dioxide emissions to curb climate change, while about a third of it has gone towards projects to help communities adapt to future impacts. Loss and damage funding would be different in compensating costs that countries can't avoid or adapt to. But there is no agreement yet over what should count as loss and damage in climate disasters, which can include damaged infrastructure and property, as well as harder to value natural ecosystems or cultural assets such as burial grounds. But who pays and who gets paid? These two questions are extremely contentious.
But for loss and damage to work, we believe that it can't only be an issue of asking state parties to do the right thing, although they must. But we believe that the non-state actors and the stakeholders, the oil and gas companies, and those who facilitate them need to be brought into a special convocation between now and COP28. How do companies make $200 billion in profits in the last 3 months and not expect to contribute at least 10 cents in every dollar of profit to a loss and damage fund? This is what our people expect.
Frustrated by difficulties and delays in securing climate financing, developing and emerging economies are now united in demanding that a loss and damage fund be established at COP27. Time, activated moral obligations, and negotiating skills at the Conference of the Parties number 27 will determine the future of the most economically vulnerable countries on earth, the members of the Alliance of Small Island States.